All right, so it looks like we are live. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Woodland Pools and to another Cardano Q&A live stream. So we've got a bunch of different things we're going to dig into today. If you're joining us live, let us know where you're joining from and any questions that you have. And in between these different topics, we'll go ahead and get into them. And if you're watching on the replay, I'll be adding chapters down below. And any questions that you have, go ahead and add them to the comments. So today, we're going to take a look at a little bit more information on this announcement that came out about Clay Nation and their partnership with Ledger. Some updates on Hydra and a demo that was posted about that. Onboarding from Hosky. A quick look at Vesper Wallet. Some information here. A really good conversation that just came up about sentiment in the ecosystem, the developer ecosystem, and how we get people on board. A lot of stuff we've been talking about a lot in this channel. And then at the end, we'll take a look at the upcoming book initial token offering and some details around that. So, like I said, as you're joining, let us know where you're joining from and any questions that you have, and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing, we saw this announcement a while ago now. This is pinned from, well, okay, so it's funny how in crypto time, a while ago, like a really long time ago, is just, 2 weeks ago or something. So that's a funny thing that I felt like this was forever ago. But here's this announcement from Clay Nation and the Claymates team about the partnership they did with Ledger, and the cool looking sort of Claymates Ledger Nano X that you can get. So let's check out this little promo that they had tweeted out here real quick. So yeah, this is just kind of their teaser on like what it was going to look like. So pretty cool looking how this ledger is going to look. And then we got, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, well, I guess it was a few days ago. Was Champ Medici, who is actually Snoop Dogg's son, talking about because if you guys remember, Champ Medici did a music video with Claymates, where it was him and Snoop Dogg, and it was all in clay, and then Charles is in it too. I don't know if you guys remember. That was a really, really cool video. But in any case, so here he is at Ledger headquarters talking with their team about the collaboration and sort of what it meant to him. So let's check this clip out as well.
I just want to keep influencing other founders to work with each other. Like, having you guys work with Claymates was definitely a dream and something that
we're so excited.
Envisioned long before it even became a thing. And, putting Claymates in the sandbox or putting Dog over here, like that's what we want. We want to show people it's not about just staying in your clique, staying in your bubble, but immersing yourself in a new field and seeing where it takes you.
So yeah, pretty cool. I don't know. So I think it's good to take a step back here and recognize that maybe you didn't even know before this who Champ Medici was. Maybe you didn't know that he was Snoop Dogg's son. Maybe you're not a huge fan of his music. Or maybe of all the different projects in Cardano, maybe you've been or not been following Claymates and Clay Nation. But what I think is really cool about this is that regardless of all of those details, we see a very sort of high profile, high visibility partnership between a Cardano specific project. This is one of the top tier NFT projects in Cardano, partnering with somebody who is extremely famous or comes from a very, prestigious line of fame in a very Web 2 music industry, partnering with something that is, blockchain sort of, specific blockchain agnostic, which is Ledger and their Ledger Nano X. And then you guys know sort of my thoughts on Ledger and the whole thing. Whatever you think about it, again, so whatever you think about Ledger or Champ or Claymates, regardless, this is fantastic publicity for Cardano. So huge props to the Claymates team. I think this is amazing that they were able to pull off this partnership. First off, pulling off this partnership with Snoop and Champ Medici, that was already something that blew everybody away. And then on top of that, being, to my knowledge, the first branded Cardano project to do something with Ledger like this. So really, really cool. If you want to get one of these, there's still some available on the Ledger store. And I've linked them down below if you want to get one of these Clay Nation branded Ledger Nano X's. But again, like I always say, whether it's this one or any other, I always recommend that you store your coins on your own Ledger or Trezor, ideally, at least a software wallet, but ideally a hardware wallet. And anyway, props to them. Really, really cool. So let's do a couple of hellos. Hydra Hype, Hail Hydra. Yeah, Zanji, good to see you, man. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about the Hydra stuff. I think that might actually be, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. So it's a great segue. And good morning, Mark. Good morning from Monday morning in Sydney. Thanks for joining us, man. I think, Mark, you are our most consistent person that joins us on the channel. So really good to see you. Thanks for joining us Monday morning, early Monday morning from Sydney, Australia. So with that, Zanji, thank you for the segue. Let's continue on to this post by Ada Whale. So he was posting about this demo that Colin from Hydra Pay tweeted out, and we'll go and check out this demo in a second. But here he was saying, oh, let me see if I can move myself out of the way. Nope, that won't do it. Let me here move myself out of the way. There we go. Cool. So in this scenario, we imagine a Hydra head formed by a few major light wallet providers of the network who all have a common interest in providing their users with cheap and fast inter-wallet payments. Therefore, each wallet provider is a head, and the process transactions inside the head on behalf of their users. And to transact inside the head, a user must first lock funds that they want to move on layer 2 inside a particular contract. This authorizes any wallet provider to redeem funds from it, provided they have proof of payment issued by the corresponding issuer. So this is actually really cool, a really cool thought on how this might work. So let's do as a reminder, talking about how Hydra and Hydra heads work, right? So the idea with Hydra and Hydra heads is, if we think about it in terms of, so let's get a little bit technical here for a second. If you remember, the way that any blockchain, including Cardano, works is that when a transaction is broadcasted to the network, you have your slot leader. So for example, the ASPEN stake pool, we get designated the slot leader, and we're the ones in charge of broadcasting that block full of transactions. When we broadcast it out to the entire network, then every other stake pool in the network is going to validate that block, look inside that block, and validate all of the transactions, right? Every other pool is going to do that. Then when every other pool has checked it, they, on their own independent copy of the blockchain, will take that block and add it to their chain of blocks, to their blockchain of all the blocks that came before it, right? Then as they continue receiving more blocks, they stack them on top of that. What happens sometimes, so now that sounds easy enough, and you would think, okay, cool, well, if propagation time for blocks, so let me actually find, you know what's a cool thing we could look at here? Let me show you something here. Let's look at Pool Tool. And they have a cool thing here where you can look at. So we're going a little off script here, but I think this is going to be a cool thing you guys appreciate. So if you go to pooltool.io/realtime, or if you just click on the right-hand side where it says recent blocks, you can see here all the blocks being created across all pools streaming by in real time. And what I want to draw our attention to here is here where it says propagation. So this propagation time is literally how much time it took for, in this case, the WGM pool that validated this, that was a slot leader to validate this block first, how long it took them to propagate that out to a certain minimum threshold of other block producers to get a sort of consensus about that block. And it only took about half of a second. And we see before that, 1% pool number 0 took about half a second again. Sometimes you see ones, so this is a little bit slower at 1.6 seconds. We've heard the benchmark that we've heard from IOG several times. You want to stay under 3 seconds. So all of these are significantly faster than the propagation time that we would need. Anything slower than 3 seconds, we're good to go. Which, as a separate thing, also gives us an idea of how much more information we can still put into blocks and still be okay from a propagation standpoint, because we're so well ahead of that 3-second benchmark. Here's 0.6 seconds, 0.35 seconds, okay? So I don't want to get too off on a tangent here, but here's the way that this works, is that you've got the propagation time of the block and how it goes to these different other validators. Now, what can happen is, if you have a situation where two different pools think that they are the leader around the same time, and they both broadcast their blocks for that slot. So here, actually, this is great. This is the block height on the right-hand side here. You see this is 9009, 210, 211, 212, 213. So this is the block height. Now, if at the next block's height, two pools think that they are next in line, whether or not they actually are for that specific block, if they both propagate at the same time, you could have certain amounts of pools across the network on either sides, both adding pool A and pool B to their stack to be that next block in line. So when that happens is you now see that you had a single chain of blocks that was adding, but now all of a sudden it actually forked. And that's what a fork is. You had a fork here where you had now two different versions of the blockchain that are now growing in different directions. This is a normal part of how the blockchain works, and what happens is that after a certain amount of time, the network automatically corrects itself and takes whichever one is the longest one, ignores the other one, and all of the pools that had, let's say for example, block A wins. And the majority of the network says, no, block A is the one that is following the true chain. This is the order of blocks we're going with. Every pool that had the stack of blocks corresponding to pool B is now going to throw away that fork, look at the order that everybody else had for block A, and they're going to replay their ledger with that. So it's called a rollback. They're going to roll back those blocks that they had, and they're going to go in the order of the one that corresponded to the one that pool A broadcasted. So all of this to say, when you have a distributed network like this with more than 3,000 stake pools, of which there's I think like 1,200 that reliably produce blocks every single epoch, this is a normal thing that happens all the time. So because of this, it takes a while for what's called finality. And finality is the notion of after what point, what stack amount of blocks can you reliably say like, oh, okay, cool, I am pretty sure that from this point moving forward, we are still on the true chain and we will not be rolled back from that point. So hopefully it's not too technical. Hopefully that makes sense. But the reason why all of this is important is that the reason why you run into that scenario is because you have all of these decentralized and distributed nodes all across the world, all getting different propagation times and getting the information at different times. And so these forks can happen. But if you don't have to deal with a huge number of nodes distributed around the world, if you deal with instead a known set, a small known set of nodes, then you're in a very different situation. Because imagine if you don't have to broadcast this out to 3,000 stake pools. If instead it was just the three of us, let's say it's Zanji and Mark and myself, right? So the three of us here form a Hydra head together, okay? Now, if you think about it, instead of having to broadcast out to 3,000 different pools, whenever we make a transaction, Zanji, Mark, and I only need to propagate it to each other. So with that, and the speed of the network, we saw its propagation time at fractions of a second, you get the finality, the knowledge between us that a block is not going to be forked or rolled back or changed. You get the finality in near instant finality. We all now agree on this nearly instantly. So Hydra is not a thing that's going to necessarily scale the entire network immediately, but any situation where you have a known set of participants, a small or known set of participants, you can then set up a Hydra head and have nearly instant micropayments back and forth. The example you hear about all the time is like an auction. So let's say, for example, the three of us, Zanji, Mark, and I, were all participating in an auction for, let's say, a book on Book.io, right? Because it's just between us, we can all be bidding back and forth with nearly instantaneously receiving each other's information and finality on our layer 2 chain of all of these bids. And then the cool thing about the way Hydra works is that when we're done, and I say, okay, you know what, Zanji won, he had the highest bid, it goes to him. This whole stack of transactions that we did inside the Hydra head, all that gets collapsed down to just the final transaction and who actually did the thing and what was the final balance of all the funds. And then that is the only thing that makes it down to the layer 1 blockchain. So there's a lot of cool different scenarios you can think of like that, where you have a known set of actors where you want to do quick micropayments back and forth. And the one that Cardano Whale is describing here is actually a pretty cool one. Let me get myself out of the way again. And so here you could see where, now imagine if you did something where you have like Eternal Wallet and Typhon Wallet and Nami, let's say. And let's say for all of those, you remember how, you don't have to do this anymore, but you remember how to interact with smart contracts, you had to add a certain collateral, like 5 or 10 ADA or something like that. Imagine if instead you had, you could have the option where you opt in and you say, I'm going to lock, I don't know, 20 ADA or 100 ADA. It's totally opt out. Opt in rather. You can take it back at any time. But you say, to facilitate these nearly instant transactions, I am going to opt in to lock in some amount of ADA into the Hydra head run between these wallets. Let's call it the wallet's Hydra head. And now if you think about it, this Hydra head would be operated, the heads in this node would be the Eternal server itself, the Nami server itself, the Typhon server. So you're not necessarily directly participating. It's Eternal, Nami, and Typhon. And then for each of them, they have funds that are locked up by their different people using it. And so now you've got basically like this balance. So the same way how like an Apple Pay, for example, you load in like a balance in Apple Pay, or even on like on Venmo, you have your Venmo balance. Imagine if you do something like that where you have a balance that's sitting there for Hydra transactions. And when you do that, you can now have nearly instantaneous transactions back and forth from other people that are also participating in this program. So that's like a really, really cool example that I hadn't thought of that I wanted to share that Cardano Whale was talking about. But in any case, let's look at this demo here. So this is Colin from the Hydra team. He specifically works on Hydra Pay. And here is a really sort of first pass kind of demo at how this can look. Let me actually come out of here because this is not looking the way I want to. But anyway, hopefully you can kind of see here. Let's rewind this here. So he's going to send some funds from this phone to the other. He's going to click on scan QR code. Here's the QR code for the other person. He scans this, and now he's going to send, see how much he wants to send. He's send 99 test ADA. And he can put a name for this Hydra head that he's going to make. And now he's sending it. Now, by the time he picks up this other phone, when he grabs this other phone here, he now goes into the pending transactions. There it is. And there already is that pending transaction. By the time he even just picked up the other phone, that transaction was already pending to go through. So obviously, this is very much just, him testing at his desk, sort of a first pass at this whole thing. But it's really cool to see how this process can work and how we can do these nearly instantaneous transactions. Another example that I heard Colin actually mention before that I think is really cool is imagine if, for example, there's a store that you purchase things from on a regular basis. Let's say, for example, a coffee shop that's down the street from your house, and you go there every morning to get coffee or to get breakfast or something like that. Similarly, what I was just saying about how for this wallet feature, you would just deposit some amount of funds that you would allocate towards the nearly instantaneous Hydra transactions. You would similarly, you could say, okay, I'm going to open up a Hydra head with my local coffee shop, and I'm going to just, the same way with Apple Pay, I'm going to do, let's say, 50 ADA at a time or something like that, which at any time you can take back. But to facilitate this, you can open it up and put 50 ADA in there. And then anytime you go to that coffee shop, you would just walk up, you would scan the QR code, and then basically by the time you put your phone back in your wallet, they've already received your payment through the Hydra head that you're sharing. Because these heads can be long running too. They don't have to be like it's a short thing. So then let's say at the end of the week, they can always shut the head down and then take down the funds you've deposited in there, or they can do it at any time really. But so these are some examples of how this could work, but it's kind of cool to see a real live demo working. So let's, yeah, cool. So let's stop there and see what other questions and comments that we have. Sean Akus or Asus, yo, good to have you. Where are you joining us from? Art, Official Intelligence, hello again. You've been with us a few weeks now. Thanks for coming back. Where are you joining us from again? I don't remember. Oh, because of the forking process, you create a new version of the chain, a Hydra head, that isn't the main network, which is stressed, so you get initial speed of a non-stressed network. Yes, but even more so. So the forking process, as I mentioned, happens as a byproduct of the fact that it takes time for all these nodes to get consensus and agreement on what the true chain is. And so it's not necessarily about a non-stress network. It's about the fact that since there's a known number of participants, you can all come to a consensus and what's called finality almost immediately. Like if it's just like you and I sitting in a room and I'm like, hey, here's $1. Rather, think of it this way. If the network is just you and I say, here is 1 ADA, if it's just you and me, then as soon as I say that out loud and you hear it, immediately everybody on our network now knows the finality of that transaction. I've said I am giving you 1 ADA. And now if you say back to me like, okay, well, I'm going to give you 3. And I'm like, all right, well, here's 5. And we're doing some numbers back and forth, right? Then at the end of the day, once we've come to an agreement and we've said, okay, fine, you know what? Let's stop handing money back and forth. At the end of the day, I ended up giving you 11 ADA and, 20 Lovelaces or something, right? Once we've agreed on that, let's say from there, we sort of go back to the main network and we go, okay, we've been talking for an hour and I decided after all of this, forget the details of the conversation, I'm giving Art Official 11 ADA and 20 Lovelaces, and that's what we broadcast to the main chain. And that may take a second for that to propagate to all of those nodes. But as far as we care, it's no difference to us. We already did our back and forth that could have gone on for hours or days while we're doing whatever number of transactions back and forth. And the cool thing is, since it's through what's called an isomorphic state channel, which means that the consensus model that we use and the sort of that layer of how those transactions are calculated that you and I are using in that transaction is exactly the same one that the layer 1 uses. So when we hand it off to the layer 1, we have a guarantee, the same level of security guarantee in our transactions back and forth as a normal transaction broadcasted out to the network. So it's a pretty cool thing. Yeah. Okay, sweet. So with that, let's go ahead. Oh, that's actually wild. We are the Hydra heads. Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly what it would work. So any participants that are participating in it, well, we are not the Hydra heads. We would spin up a Hydra head, and we're the two participants in that Hydra head. But what we're going to see is that as more and more applications adopt this, you'll be seeing more and more apps spinning up Hydra heads. Imagine like as if, for example, like if you are at, well, the example that Matthias put together, K2Z, he wrote an example on this about a year ago, and we covered it on the channel. I'll actually link it in the description below how Hydra works. But he had a really good example of like a casino. So imagine a casino. We're all this huge casino. You're in Vegas, and you're one of the biggest casinos of the world, and it's super crowded, right? Now let's say that we just sit down, you and I and Zanji and Mark sit down at a poker table, right? We announce to the casino how many chips we're each bringing with us to the poker table. Now the four of us sit down at a game for over an hour of just hands and you know, number of chips going up and down and whatever else. Then at the end of that hour, when we all get up from the table and leave, and also at any point any one of us can get up and leave, but let's say, just to make it easy, we all get up and leave at the same time. When we get up and leave, we all know now, take a count of how many chips we have, and then at that point, we let the rest of the casino know, like, okay, hey guys, this is how many chips we all ended up with. Mark has 100 chips more, I have 200 chips less, Art Official has 50 chips more, and Zanji broke even, right? Which is, you know, the second best thing to winning in a casino. So then at that point, if you, in that example of the casino and the poker table, the casino is the Cardano layer 1 blockchain, and then the poker table is the Hydra head. And then all of us sitting at the table are participants in that head. So you can imagine at a casino, as a good example, casinos have lots of poker tables, and each of those would be individual Hydra heads with their known set of actors. And then again, whenever a hand is dealt and the chips are moved around, everyone at that table knows with near instant finality, right? As soon as the dealer says, okay, this person won the pot, everyone at the table agrees almost instantaneously, like, yeah, that's how that went. So anyway, so that's sort of an example of how the heads and stuff works. Bidimon, very cool innovation. On another note, I just read that a new peer-to-peer update just automated the manual task. Stake pool operators have to perform to remove bad peers. Oh, yeah. So this is something we've talked about for a while. Dynamic peer-to-peer. So I'm glad you brought that up. So, okay, so there's a whole different conversation. So here's how stake pools and relays work. So the way that this works is, great question, by the way. And this is like actually my favorite kind of live streams, when you guys have like good questions and we can like dig into these technical topics, and then we can all learn a little bit more about them. And then we're going to have our different news things that we go through here. But any other questions you guys have as you come in, I'm happy to dig into any of these things. Now we can all just sort of keep learning about this stuff together. But here's how this works. When you have a stake pool, like the ASPEN stake pool, the one that we run, you have your block producer. And actually, you know what? Let me pull up pool.pm again. Oh, no, pool tool, sorry. Okay. So if we look at pool tool for ASPEN, for example, here we see here's our relays, right? So we have 4 relays around the world. Right now, one of them is doing its automatic restart, but we have 4 relays. 3 of them are up right now, and those are spread all over the world. Now, what happens is these relays, when you look at the whole block propagation that we were talking about, right? When you're looking at this process of the recent blocks that are flying by, right? Oh, here we go. This was a slot battle. These are 2 different people that that got the same exact slot. And they were both told they were slot leaders at this time. And this is what a slot battle is. It's a totally normal thing that happens all the time. So when you hear about your pool operator saying things like, hey, we were expected to get this many blocks, but we only got that many because of slot battles, this is what this is. That the network told both this WPJ1 pool and AdaStat, hey, both of you are going to be the slot leader at slot, for block 9009-255. So that's what that is. So there's a cool little demonstration of that. But the way this works is when these blocks are being propagated, right? It's not propagated by the actual block producer. It's propagated by the relays that sit around the block producer. So imagine if my palm here is our block producer, right? Your secure block producing node that you don't want the rest of the network to directly know about. Then from there, you have your relays. And from a security standpoint, what you do is you have your block producer is the one that validates the blocks. But then it only directly communicates with its individual relays, and then those relays are the ones that communicate with the rest of the network. So from a security standpoint, everyone else on the network knows the addresses of these relays, but nobody except for your own relays know the address of your block producer. So that way, if anybody tries to attack and do a denial of service or whatever else, they can only get your relays themselves, and your block producer is safe, and nobody knows its address or any of its information. So with your question here, previously at the very beginning of the Shelley era, in terms of these relays and who they talk to, that's called their peers, like which ones they're interacting with. Previously, the what's called your topology file, these peers, you'd have to put a list of peers in a topology file for these different relays. You have to manually hard code who those would be. So for example, different stake pool operators that I know and work with, like Paul with Cardano with Paul, or Patty from Shamrock Pool, Eric and the team over at Azure Pool. Let's say we all know each other and trust each other and say, okay, these are all responsible stake pool operators. I'm going to add their relays to the list of the peers for my relays in this topology file. The problem with that is that it relies on me just knowing these people and then asking them for their IP addresses, and maybe just me knowing them doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to have the fastest propagation time from my relay to theirs, right? What I want is not necessarily just people that run responsible pools, but at the end of the day, what I want is that, and also which is going to be the fastest way that I can propagate my information for my blocks to the whole network as fast as possible. We see out here this TLK pool propagated in almost 2 seconds, but just before it, Ocean did it in less than half a second. So the goal is you want this propagation time to be as fast as possible. So since this is obviously a problem that people would have to manually enter the information for all these different relays, what a community member came out with that was really, really cool is what's called the Topology Updater. And so that's something that pretty much everybody that I know of, all the stake pool operators use. And what happens with that is that you have your relays reach out to this specific endpoint, and then at that endpoint, all the relays from across the network are reaching out to this endpoint that is community run by a community member. And it then takes all of the relays that have been submitting to this endpoint, and then it randomly assigns other peers to connect to and sends it back down to all of those relays. So the cool thing about that is that now, instead of you having to just like think of 5 or 10 or 15 people you want to connect to, the Topology Updater just gives you a list of other active relays that are in communication with it, and it says, here's a bunch of people you can connect to get your information propagated out to the network. It's really cool in a sense that it connects you with all these relays from all across the network, but the downside is that it's still, even though it's done by a community member, not by IOG or Cardano Foundation, it's still a centralized point of failure that all of us connect to get that information. It's fantastic that it was put together, but it was really supposed to be just sort of like, like a short-term brace, and then we were all going to move past that. But we've been doing that for almost 3 years now. So really great thing they came out with that. But even the people who first made that, always knew like this is a short-term, in air quotes, short-term fix. So this, to bring it all the way back around to your question, the peer-to-peer is something that's coming out from IOG. It's been on testnet for a while now. We've shown this a few times on the channel. I don't have the video with me. Let me try really quick to see if I can find it. I don't think I'm gonna be able to find it quick enough, but give me a second to see if we can find it. Peer-to-peer. So there's an article about it, but there was a. Oh man. So this is the peer-to-peer design. I wonder if they're gonna have. Oh look here, they're talking about Topology Updater. There was a really cool video that Input Output tweeted out a while back that actually showed the way that these nodes would connect to each other. We've shown it before on the channel, but anyway, I don't have it with me right now, and I don't know how long it's gonna take me to find it. But I'll do one more quick search here. Let's do Cardano. Oh, so here's Conrad, for example, talking about what you're asking about specifically. He's running that peer-to-peer, which came out on version Cardano node 8.1.1, I believe. Dang, really wanted to be able to show you guys that. Oh, okay, we'll try one more thing. Let's try Cardano peer-to-peer, and let's see. It was. Ah, yes, awesome, cool. So here was only 4 seconds long. That's unfortunate. But let's see if we can see. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. So it's just a GIF of it. But oh, great. I'm glad we were able to find this. So, okay, so we can see here, this is what your question is. Here we can see this is a relay node, this little green guy bouncing around. And now instead of having to go to a central place to connect to other nodes, other relay nodes, you see him dynamically sort of reaching out in the network to different relay nodes based on their optimal propagation time and how quickly they can connect to each other. And so this is what the big innovation about peer-to-peer is, that this is something now that we built into the node itself. You actually see this little pink guy here. He connects to these 3 or 4 nodes, and then he like releases from them, and he's going to connect to somebody else. So, yeah, here we go. So, yeah, this is actually a really great article on peer-to-peer. Here's this, and I will, I'll share this in the description below as well. But so anyway, so this is how peer-to-peer is going to work, where now instead of having to rely on this centralized point and getting this information from this one community member, which again, thank you so much for doing that, now it'll be truly dynamic and takes us one more step closer to full decentralization, where all the blocks are being produced by community stake pools. Granted, IOG still has their own, but they are a community member like anybody else. There's something special in the protocol that makes IOG have more blocks than anybody else. And now with a dynamic peer-to-peer, which is not fully enabled on everyone's nodes yet, but everyone's starting with just one relay to test it out on mainnet, this will let relay nodes connect to each other on the fly dynamically. So yeah, there's a nice long answer for you. Appreciate me getting detailed in the answer. Yeah, happy to. So like I said, if you guys have any other questions about anything as we move through it, let me know. Always happy to dig into this stuff. And then I saw Zanji for our poker table at the casino. I'll take even. Yeah, I'll take even any day at a casino. Very cool. Sweet. So let's go ahead and so we just showed this here. Cool. Yeah, great. Any other questions? Let me know. And as you're joining, let us know where you're joining from. Let's go ahead and continue on. And actually, I think that's a good time to stop here. And I noticed this morning that we finally just passed 1,000 followers on Twitter. So if you're following us on Twitter, hey, thanks so much. I originally made the Twitter account as just another way to communicate with our delegators. And since then, it's kind of taken on an interesting sort of life of its own of like different things that I don't necessarily cover on the channel, much more real-time stuff that's coming out, conversations between people. And then also, too, given our whole nature and woodland theme, I also just tweet out, beautiful views from time to time whenever I see them. So for those of you that are following us on Twitter, thanks so much. I can't believe we're at 1,000 followers. I kind of feel like I don't even know what I'm doing on Twitter half the time. So thanks. And with that, I think it's probably a great opportunity to stop and say a huge thank you and welcome to this week's newest delegators. We truly appreciate your support, and we're so excited to be on this journey with you. Let's keep growing together. I say it every week, and I always mean it. Thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. And actually, with that, another cool milestone that just happened this week. Let me take this off for right now. This week, we finally just crossed the 15 million ADA delegated threshold to the ASPEN stake pool, and now over 1,100 delegators. So thank you so much to everybody supporting us. And if you appreciate the work that we do here on the channel and all this educational content and all how we dig into the details to help everybody learn a little bit more, the best way you can support the channel is by delegating to the ASPEN stake pool. So thank you again to everybody. Can't say how much I appreciate it enough. So thanks a lot. Let's go ahead and move on. Artificial. Hey, congrats. Thanks. Really appreciate it. It's been a really, really cool ride. It's been a lot of fun to be on this ride with you guys. So, yeah. Cool. So with that, and we were talking about, so do another segue here. We're talking about people coming on board and supporting and stuff like that. One of the biggest challenges we've seen for a while is how do we get other people onboarded into blockchain and specifically Cardano? And actually, I would even invert those and say, they'll get to Cardano eventually because I truly believe that we have some of the best merits of any blockchain. But so then to that, how do we get people into blockchain at all? And there's this big announcement that came out that is a pairing of BuffyBot, which is from the legendary Adam Dean. He's one of the OGs in the Cardano blockchain. Hosky and Vesper Wallet. Hosky always killing it with the branding. Coming out with the announcement of Proof of Onboarding, or PoO. The gateway to Cardano. So I thought this was really cool. For those of you guys that don't know BuffyBot or Adam Dean, before NMaker, before a lot of these other things, BuffyBot was sort of the first NFT minting platform that anybody could go to as a hobby or for a project or whatever and just mint some NFTs. And then, of course, everybody knows Hosky and the Hosky tokens, which the goal of that project was to give people worthless tokens that they can swap around to get used to and comfortable working with a wallet. And then Vesper Wallet, which I've actually not personally worked with, but let me know if you guys have. All of them pairing together to make onboarding for Cardano easier. So here's how this is going to work. BuffyBot, Hosky, and Vesper are thrilled to announce the unveil of the Proof of Onboarding PoO protocol, an open source tool engineered to simplify the onboarding process of the Cardano ecosystem. So here's how it's going to work. So it's 3 simple steps. You just scan a QR code, and that takes you to the Vesper download page. You create a wallet on Vesper, and then you scan one more QR code from your wallet to activate an airdrop to the new wallet, initiating exploration of the Cardano ecosystem with Cardano native tokens, which I'm assuming are going to be Hosky tokens, and some NFTs powered by BuffyBot. So I think this is really cool because if you think about it, think about now for all of us, I mean, on the channel, for example, you know, here on the channel, look at the amount of tutorials that we have. Let's do a search for just wallets. Look at how many tutorials we have about wallets and how to get onboarded. Nami, Eternal, Typhon. If you go far enough back, you'll see Daedalus, Yoroi, Adalite, right? So for a lot of people, this can be kind of overwhelming in terms of like, how do I get on board? How do I get started? What do I need to do? So I love this idea that for people that are first coming into the ecosystem, all they do is scan a QR code. It takes them to somewhere where they make a wallet. Then from there, once their wallet's set up, they scan another QR code. They get basically some test tokens, right? Hosky tokens famously have 0 value. And then from there, they can practice sending and receiving transactions on the network. So I love this idea. And let me know in the comments and down below if you guys have worked with Vesper Wallet before. I have not, but I think it's probably time that I do. I've heard a lot of good things about them. And maybe we can take a look at them next week. Maybe I'll pull up a wallet live and we can play around with that. So let me know what you guys think about Vesper Wallet and if you've used it yet. So this is how we try and streamline and get people on board into the Cardano ecosystem as consumers. But just before we went live here, a conversation started on Twitter that I wanted to point out that I thought was really interesting and kind of sobering, but an interesting thing for us to look at and think about in terms of this is how we get end users on board. But the end users, if you think about it, like how this is working with BuffyBot and Hosky and Vesper, for an end user to come on board, all of these things need to already be in place. So you already have to have these different projects and companies and developers working to build these things so that when someone shows up, we have a way to bring them on board in an easy way. So that's where I always talk about so much about how important it is to have a good developer experience and make it easy for developers to build so that when they build things, then it makes it easier for just normal consumers to come in. Patrick from Endmaker tweeted out this very concise tweet where all he said was, the overall sentiment around Cardano when looking at Cardano builders versus the Cardano community is not aligned at all at the moment. And there was... Actually, it says here, really interesting to read the replies. Many seem to agree while others disagree. I kept it a bit vague to let room for everyone's opinions. And yeah, and so there was actually a really great discussion that came from this. A lot of people were saying their thoughts on if communities and builders in Cardano were aligned or not or whatever. But then there was this incredible take from Santiago, who is the founder and sort of lead developer for TX Pipe, and who is the team who does Demeter Run and also Icon. And I wanted to read this because I think that this is a really great take on what Patrick was saying there. And I think a really important thing for all of us to keep in mind when we talk on the channel all the time about the importance of dev onboarding, what it means for the rest of the ecosystem. So here's Santiago's quote tweet of Patrick's mention about the issues that developers are feeling in the ecosystem. And he said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in Cardano, but I agree with you, Patrick. Sentiment is divided. Let me start with the bright side. It's refreshing to see new teams and solo devs getting onboarded into the ecosystem now that the tooling has improved. How many times have you guys heard me on live streams and on videos saying over and over and over again how important it is to have a good dev onboarding on-ramp and making it easier for developers so that as we develop things faster, then everybody else can then actually use them. The teams building protocols, tools, and platforms should be proud of this upward trend, and shout out to the engineers at IOHK, Cardano Foundation, Icon, Endmaker, Marlowe, DC Spark, 5 Binaries, M Labs, H Labs, Option, Go Maestro, Blink Labs, and Mesh, just to name a few. And a shameless plug, of course, to TX Pipe and Demeter Run. If you're not following TX Pipe and Demeter Run, you should. These guys are building some absolutely incredible stuff. The upward trend is also directly tied to individual technical advocates, lifting the tide for all new devs. Just to name a few, K-Torz that we've talked about a bunch of times, the technical director of the Cardano Foundation. He was also one of the lead developers for Hydra, so we've talked about his work a lot. Andrew Westberg, who I'm a big fan of and I've talked about a lot on the channel. Gimbal Labs, Pi from Sunday Swap, friend of the channel as well. Barry Ailes, Patterfine, Patrick, who's the one that started this whole conversation. Rick McCracken, Adam Dean, who I was just telling you guys about, who started BuffyBot. Sebastian from DC Spark. Conrad from Blade Pool. Lucas Rojas, who's actually one of the lead developers for Icon. Microproofs, Lars from IOG. Danny Rebar from Project Catalyst, and there's many more. So these are a lot of familiar names that we cover on the channel all the time. And so here Santiago is saying, hey, it's great that these tools are being built and that all of these people are helping to lift everything, and it's really good that we're seeing this momentum. But here's the ugly part. I feel that seasoned teams that have been building for several months and years have a different sentiment. I'm talking about those companies with several engineers in the payroll, limited runways, where founders are investing their own money to keep the company afloat. And so you might ask, why do they complain? Startups are meant to be hard, right? Well, yes, but after a while, a few things in our ecosystem become painfully frustrating. Number one, funding is hard. VCs will slam the door at your face at the first mention of Cardano, and he's experienced this firsthand. You don't even get to pitch your idea. You've already lost. Arguments they give are vague or unfunded, but it doesn't change the fact. This is something that Cardano Whale is trying to fight against constantly with tweeting out actual stats and facts about Cardano and how things are progressing and how things are compared to other chains and how they're working. But for whatever reason, this is a reality that we're in right now. So if blockchain as a whole has been going through this whole first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then they win. Cardano is still somewhere in between. We kind of slide back and forth from this ignored to laughed at to ignored to being fought to laughed at. It's kind of this sliding thing back and forth. And there's lots of different theories people have as to why this happens. But I think a big part of it is related to bullet number 2. I think 1 and 2 are directly related, but we'll come to that. So when it comes to funding, there's all these challenges from a venture capital standpoint. And so Catalyst is your best choice. I'm really glad we have it, but it's not meant to support startups or business models looking to grow or even become self-sustainable. It just wasn't built for that. Catalyst is a great way for you to make a proof of concept of the thing that you're building, right? But it's not built as the same way how a venture capitalist would inject several $1 million to help you get to hyper-scaled growth, right? So funding is a challenge, right? Number 2, this is one I've been meaning to write a thread about, but anyway, let's get into this here. The extended UTxO model, eUTxO, is hard. This might sound like an implementation detail, but we're building on top of a totally new paradigm. We're still defining our best practices and reusable patterns, and this makes development hard and overwhelming. I want to pause here for a second because I want to make a thread about this. When I talk about how easy it was to get up and running on Icon, that thread that I did a few days ago on Twitter, it is, and Icon is fantastic. Sorry, it wasn't a thread. I want to do a thread on Icon itself too, but I just mentioned how great it was to get up to speed with Icon. People were then saying oh, well, I've just had, over a year trying to learn Plutus, and I saw you got up to speed on Icon in 2 weeks, or I learned Icon so much faster. I think what that kind of hides is that in that time that people were coming up to speed with Plutus, they were also learning the extended UTxO model. This bullet number 2, I think, is an understated part that aside from the language that you choose to implement your smart contracts, the extended UTxO model, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people that are using it, is a beautifully elegant model that lets you have deterministic, so you know ahead of time if something's going to work or not before you even submit it to the chain. Wonderful determinism there. But it is a totally different way to think about compared to an account-based model like Ethereum. So it's a pretty steep learning curve to start thinking that way. Once you get there, it's one of those things where once you make it up to imagine climbing a really steep mountain, and when you get to the top, it's just beautiful, right? That's what it's like learning eUTxO. It's really, really tough to kind of wrap your head around it. And when you get to the top, all of a sudden you see things completely differently in how the chain is working, and things are just so beautifully elegant in how they come together. That thread that RJ did about our different contracts that we wrote for the book swap and lock contracts, all of that was facilitated by the extended UTxO model, but this is a pretty steep learning curve. So continuing on, number 3, infrastructure is hard. Cardano infrastructure is so hard that I decided to build a whole business model around it, which is what we were just talking about. Santiago was the guy who started TXPipe, and TXPipe has a lot of different projects or products. One's Demeter Run. Icon now is pretty much taken over by these other folks, but it was originally something associated with TXPipe, if I'm not mistaken. So it's funny, but it's true that he made a whole business out of infrastructure, but a lot of team resources are going into efficient indexing, performant transaction submission, CBOR manipulation, etc., leaving little room to focus on core business stuff. So, at the end of the day, some teams will survive while others will leave, and hats off to all of them. As an ecosystem, I think our best option right now is to focus on governance. With governance out of the way, we should move on to business development, infrastructure, and user adoption. And he says, best of luck in Edinburgh. That's where the SIP 1694 is going to happen. We're counting on you. Let's get it done. Fantastic write-up by Santiago, who is just a legend in our ecosystem. And if you haven't heard of him, he's running a bunch of really, really great things in the background. But this is exactly what I talk about all the time, about how important it is to get infrastructure in place to make things easier for developers to get up and running. That's why, the same way how you hear me talking about projects that I'm excited about, like Book.io and World Mobile and whatever else, but the other main category of projects that I love covering on the channel because I think they're so important is infrastructure projects like EndMaker and how they're making it easier for other projects to launch NFT projects. And Icon and Demeter Run, how they're making it easier for other projects to launch their ideas onto the network. This compounding effect needs to happen. And I think it's important as we all go through the bear market that we all just keep in mind that this is still happening. This is very much in flight and very much being built out. So, you know, not necessarily the most fun conversation. You know, I like to keep things positive on the channel, but I do think it's important for all of us to be realistic about that, you know, funding is hard right now, especially in a bear market. Extending UTxO is tough. Once you get past it, it's great, but it is tough. And infrastructure for any ecosystem is critically important, boring, and important and hard to build. So once this stuff is built out, the infrastructure is in place, and more people understand extended UTxO, I do think that there'll be more projects and more visibility, and the funding will come. I think literally he lists us from 1 to 3. We're going to need to, as a whole ecosystem, build from 3, then 2, then 1 will come along eventually. So I wanted to share that because I thought it was really well written, and Santiago is a great guy who really knows his stuff. Okay, let's see. We got some comments here before we move on. Vidiman, I convinced an ETH maxi I know to do a Steelman thought experiment with Cardano. I suggested he could use a ChatGPT supplement his research, and I didn't expect to get support from him. Vitalik stating he thinks ETH staking is too risky for him. That ended up being what broke the camel's back for my friend. Yeah. So for you guys who haven't seen, there's a pretty famous video now that came out about Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum and lead figurehead for Ethereum, talking about that he does not stake all of his Ethereum. That's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Now, granted, in that, the reason they say he doesn't do it is because he needs to do things like multi-sig wallets or whatever else and blah, blah, blah. But the point of it is that whether or not that was really the reason, or he's saying that as a more palatable thing to cover up real reasons why he has, regardless, the same as how right here we're saying that we have a way to go in the Cardano ecosystem for dev onboarding and infrastructure. One thing that Cardano is exceptionally well at is how easy and frictionless staking is, where you literally just open up your wallet and you say stake and it just works, right? That's something that they don't have in Ethereum. And so, yeah, great point, Vidimon. I like complex things simplified. Yeah, so do I. So happy to dig into these things on the channel. Mark Byers, great summary. And I love how Cardano is willing to have the hard conversations where progress comes from. I totally agree. And it's funny because sometimes, you know, we don't have to even look outside of the Cardano ecosystem to see some really difficult conversations. Sometimes the hardest conversations come from inside our own community. So I think this is a testament to the fact that if you think about it, Cardano is based on the notion of like peer review and really smart people writing down their ideas and then taking it to conferences and things and putting it in front of other really smart people and basically getting their ideas torn apart, and then they take it back, they fix it, and they're like, all right, what do you think of it now, kind of thing. That's how the whole Cardano blockchain was made. And in my opinion, that sort of mindset has kind of also attracted some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my entire life, all coming in and then kind of doing similar things with their own projects. I mean, this list here of people, K-Tor-Z, Andrew Westberg, these people I talk about all the time, Pi from Sunday Swap, Patrick, Conrad. I recently just met Lucas from the Icon team, Book Dev, RJ over here at Book.io. Some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with, all in the same place, all kind of pushing each other to learn and grow. Like, for example, Adam Dean, the OG I was talking about. Long before I joined Book.io, actually the very, very beginning of Book's launch, when the notion of ebooks on chain was first launched, I remember Adam Dean replied to one of the Book tweets and said, okay, great, but how are you going to keep anybody from just going to someone else's address and just reading it, reading their book? And how is this different from just publishing, a PDF somewhere that anybody can read? And that was sort of like someone who obviously is a big fan of the chain, a big fan of the technology, pushing on this new project and be like, all right, well, but so what actually are you doing here? Like, what makes this interesting? And that actually had to like push RJ to then write this whole long thread on how decentralized encrypted assets were going to work on Book.io and how the Gutenberg Bible was minted. And, even though these conversations can be uncomfortable at the time, these are the kind of things that I think we all do in the Cardano ecosystem, where it's this sort of like, I don't know, pushing each other to be better, coming from a like place of logic and just from brilliant people that are all looking the same direction. Like, we want to get better. We want to build this better. How are you doing that? Can it be done better? And sometimes it does turn into kind of like infighting and loses its productivity. But I think many times, even though it kind of feels uncomfortable in the moment, we all end up growing and learning from it. And Adam Dean is actually, Adam and RJ have a great relationship now. And he's helped the way that we do our airdrops, so a lot of our transaction chaining. So another cool thing, for example, this is a great example. With Extended UTxO model, because of the way the Extended UTxO model works, and the fact that it's fully deterministic and that without even involving the blockchain, offline how a transaction is going to work, you can do something that is only available in eUTxO chains like Cardano, where you can do what's called transaction chaining. So for example, if I make a transaction from myself to Mark, right? And then what I want to do is, as soon as that transaction is over, I want to take the balance of that transaction, I want to send it to Zanji. And then from there, the balance of that transaction, I want to send to Art Official. I can actually chain together all of these different transactions offline and link them all together in order, because I know deterministically this is going to lead to here, to here, to here, to here, and then take the whole thing and submit that whole big batch of 5 different transactions all to the blockchain all at once. And that transaction chaining is something that Adam Dean got really good at really early on when he was doing BuffyBot, and how he was going to do airdrops in an efficient way to lots of different wallets all at once with the UTxO model. And with those conversations of how he did that, that is how RJ learned how to do it at Book.io. And now all of the airdrops that we do for Book.io all use transaction chaining that RJ learned from Adam. So this is really sort of like a compounding effect of just brilliant people all working together, pushing each other, and all of us growing as an ecosystem. So yeah, thanks for that comment, Mark, because it got me thinking about what I think is one of the best things about our ecosystem, how we all sort of have these hard conversations and progress. Vic, good to see you, man. Always good to see you, Vic. Adam Dean is great. Met him a few times. Super nice dude. Does so much for the community with his Cardano community meetups. Yeah, and also, too, Adam Dean is the one who created CNFTCon, which is now NFT LV. If you're going to that, that will be at the end of September in Las Vegas. I will be there. Yeah, it should be a good time. But this whole thing that we were just talking about transaction chaining and all of that, made me think, let's actually jump ahead a little bit here. I want to remind everybody, so now we're talking about Book.io for a little bit, but I want to remind everybody that for those here that are OGs from the Book.io community, remember that Monday, tomorrow, there's going to be a snapshot for the Wildlife series. So take all of your books that are in the Wildlife series, make sure they're all in your wallet, that you delist them off of any sales platforms like JPEG Store or whatever else, and then however many copies you have of the Wildlife series, you're going to airdrop, the date is still to be determined, but you will be airdropped a copy of Swift's Family Robinson. As of when this tweet was sent out a couple of days ago, there was only 356 sets in place. So if it were to be taken at that time, there will only be 356 copies of Swift's Family Robinson minted across the whole chain. So if you're in the OG Book Club and you have some of your books on platforms, whatever, get them off. Or if you're trying to put together your Wildlife series, make sure that you do that. And then here are the books that are in the Wildlife series. Lost World, Jungle Book, Winnie the Pooh, and Tarzan. Oh, and White Fang, Dr. Dolittle, and Call of the Wild. So yeah, there you go. I wanted to stop and talk about that because this is actually a perfect transition to what we were just talking about, where the way these airdrops are facilitated is with transaction chaining enabled by the extended UTxO model. Cardano is stronger, better, and more decentralized for having all this infrastructure built out by independent devs and companies rather than IOG. I completely agree. This is actually a really cool thing that we've seen. That, originally when we started the channel, now like over almost 2.5 years ago, we mainly used to talk about just stuff that IOG was doing, right? Like roadmap stuff that IOG was doing. But so many of these things, think about today, for example, all the stuff that we've talked about, The only thing that we've talked about today that was IOG specific was this peer-to-peer thing. Other than that, everything else, including the topology updater that we were talking about earlier, all of that has been done by community members. So that's pretty cool. And so talking about that, let's we can bring this back here for anybody else that's joining us here at the tail end. But so talking about that, I want to dig into and remind everybody that the Book.io initial token offering, the ITO, is starting in 10 days. No pressure, RJ. We've got 10 days. But for that, the way that it's going to work is that the first people that get access to this ITO, if you want to buy the book token, first people are going to be those who are part of the OG book club that I was mentioning. The way you become part of the OG book club is by owning the original book that was minted by Book.io, the Gutenberg Bible. If you have one, you're good to go, and you'll be able to participate first in the ITO. If not, you can buy one on JPEG Store. They're kind of expensive right now. So I get how it might be prohibitively expensive for some people. So it's the floor right now is 650 ADA, so that is a lot. So if you don't have 650 ADA that you want to shell out for that, Book.io has been doing giveaways. Ben's been doing giveaways in the Book.io account, I think almost daily at this point, giving away Gutenberg Bibles. So follow Book.io on Twitter. And here is a giveaway for a Gutenberg Bible that's going on right now that you can participate in. Like, follow, retweet, and tell them your favorite crypto influencer. So yeah, that's a way that you can get yourself a Gutenberg Bible. Let's go ahead and take a look at the details of the initial token offering. And for people coming in here at the tail end, let me know where you're joining from, any questions that you have. And we will address questions at the end of this book section. I think we might wrap it up there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the book ITO. So we got this nice little countdown clock here, which adds no level of anxiety at all to our development team. Where we've got in 10 days on the, 10 days and 15 hours. So it'll be, in the United States, it'll be July 20th, is when the ITO kicks off. The first people that will be able to have access to the ITO will be people that are part of the OG book club. If you don't want, or can't purchase a Gutenberg Bible, then you still want to get access to it, you can join the whitelist. And then the second group of people that will be getting access to the ITO will be those that are part of this whitelist group. So yeah, with that, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but basically the way this works is there was a book classic, an initial book token that was issued. There was 10 billion, I think, but this is before there was support for decimal places. And so this new book policy that was minted is basically the same amount of tokens, but with the support for decimal places. So it'll be the same 10 billion plus 6 decimal places put after that. So that's the difference between the old and new book. So if you've seen in the past, like if you go to Tap Tools, and if you've seen in the past this book token, this one is the book classic. So this new book is going to be the exact same amount, just with the 6 decimal places. So you can get to the IT early with OG Book Club or join the whitelist. And if you happen to have a book classic, you can swap your book classic for your book new here on our swap page. And this is the and if you haven't done this already, definitely make sure you get in there before the 12th. You're right now at the 4% bonus tier. We were looking at the other day, and like 95% of book classic people or more have already swapped to the new book. Keep in mind that there will be no functionality of book classic. Everything about the book token, read to earn, discounts on mints, all of that stuff is only going to be with the new token, so you have no incentive to keeping the old one. So if you have book classic, make sure you come here and swap. And if you've already swapped, you can come here and check your book balance to see how much is sitting at the lock address contract right now, being safely stored, waiting to unlock and get it back to you. Then also when the ITO kicks off and you buy your book tokens and they go to that time locked contract, you'll be able to check your balance here as well. I actually have a pull request right now that when you load up the page and connect your wallet here, you'll also see here your balance of your book tokens. That should probably go live tomorrow or the day after. So for now, you can come and check it on book.io/ITO or on the swap page. And then in the next couple of days, we'll have it that up here, you'll be able to see your balance as well. Yeah, exactly. So the Gutenberg Bible, the printing press mint, was the first book minted on book token. Very, very cool theming. I got to give hats off, man. Like, the development team is great. RJ's probably the best developer I've ever worked with. But the marketing team at Book is absolutely incredible. They always knock it out of the park with really, really cool themes of things and marketing of stuff. So like the first book they did was the Gutenberg Bible. The first airdrop for the Monster series was on Halloween, and it was Sleepy Hollow. Yeah, the Gutenberg Bible absolutely kills it. All right, let's see here. RTA multi-service. Are there any projects that I can learn about tokenizing assets in the Cardano? Oh, hey, I think I saw you in the comments a little bit earlier. I meant to get back to you, but then I was getting ready for the live stream. So what do you mean about tokenizing? You mean like fractional NFTs or something like that? I'm not sure. Let me know. But cool. So yeah, let me know, and I'll get back to your comment, or let me know here, or leave a comment here, and I'll get back to you with that. But I think we are now right at an hour, a longer one today. We had a lot of different stuff that I wanted to dig into. Make sure that you take your stuff for the Wildlife series off of any exchanges so you can be in that snapshot and get Swiss Family Robinson. Participate in this. You want to get a free Gutenberg Bible. The book eUTxO kicks off in only 10 days. And if you appreciate the work that we do here on the channel, the best way you can support the channel is by delegating to the ASPEN stake pool. Join the other 1,100 delegators here. We would love to have you. Thank you so much, everybody. Next week, I think we'll probably switch back to Mondays. So we'll be doing the live stream 8 days from now on Monday at 11 p.m. UTC, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and 5 p.m. in warm, sunny Colorado. Let me know down below any questions that you have or any stuff that I might have missed this week. And if nothing else, chat with us on Twitter if you want to keep up to date and keep in touch and join one of our 1,000 followers there. And if nothing else, we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you then.